Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a bold statement. They lied to you about success when they told you it was about wealth and status, about how much you own, how many people know your name, how many likes your last photo got, or how far your car sits above the pavement. They crafted a glittering illusion and they sold it to you before you even knew how to speak, through cartoons, school posters, glossy magazine covers, and eventually through every screen you scroll. They handed you a checklist: fancy job, big house, nice watch, a body that looks like it was carved by an algorithm. And they said, "Here, chase this. This is what success looks like." But here's the truth, an uncomfortable truth. That image, that entire framework is hollow. And if you believe it, if you truly build your life around that idea, you will very likely reach the top of that mountain only to find it's made of smoke. That's the kind of success that doesn't love you back. It doesn't care about your soul or your relationships or your sense of meaning. It's cold, it's indifferent, it offers applause and attention, but it doesn't offer depth. It doesn't offer peace. And peace, real, lasting peace, is something that only comes when what you do aligns with who you are. Now, I'm not suggesting that success can't include wealth or recognition. Of course it can. But those things should be byproducts, side effects of doing something worthwhile, something valuable, something that makes you stand taller, not just in the eyes of others, but in your own estimation. If you're pursuing a career only because it sounds impressive at dinner parties or looks good on a resume, you're building a tower on sand, and when life pushes, and it will push, it's going to collapse. You see, when people chase status, what they're really doing is outsourcing their sense of worth to other people's opinions. That's dangerous because it's fickle. The applause that comes today can vanish tomorrow, and if you've tied your identity to that noise, you'll fall into despair the moment it quiets. Success that's rooted in image is fragile. It forces you to wear a mask, to pretend, to keep performing even when you're exhausted. That's not success. That's slavery to perception. What you want, what you need, is to build your life on something stronger, something real. That means asking yourself hard questions. Questions like, what am I good at? What can I contribute? What gives me a sense of purpose that doesn't disappear when the Wi-Fi goes out? These aren't easy questions. They're demanding, and they won't hand you neat answers. But they're the right questions because they don't push you towards status. They pull you inward towards something honest. And here's the paradox. The people who make the deepest impact in the world, they're usually the ones who weren't trying to be impressive. They were trying to be useful. They weren't chasing a spotlight. They were chasing truth or beauty or service. And because of that, the spotlight ended up chasing them. You want to talk about success? Let's talk about someone who wakes up every day and pours themselves into their craft, not because it's glamorous, but because it's meaningful. Let's talk about the teacher who refuses to give up on a student, the father who sacrifices sleep to keep his family safe, the entrepreneur who builds something not because it's trendy, but because it solves a real problem for real people. That's success. And yes, it might not look shiny, it might not trend, but it's the kind of success that allows you to sleep at night. It allows you to walk into a room with your head held high, not because people clap, but because you know you're living with integrity. That's the battle, really, between the appearance of success and the substance of it. And we live in a time where appearances are everything, where people curate their lives for an audience instead of cultivating their souls in private, where it's more important to look happy than to be whole. And I'm telling you, that's a trap. It's a treadmill. It never ends. Because when you define success as being admired, you're forever at the mercy of the crowd. But when you define success as being someone you respect, you become the standard. You take back control. And maybe that doesn't come with a blue check mark next to your name, but it comes with something far more powerful: self-respect. And you can't fake that. You can't Photoshop that. So the lie is seductive. It promises quick dopamine hits, surface level satisfaction, the kind of success that looks good on a billboard but feels empty in your chest. And people are chasing that every day. They're buying things they can't afford to impress people they don't even like. They're saying yes to jobs that drain them, yes to relationships that demean them, yes to lifestyles that are breaking them. All because they've been told this is what success looks like. But success isn't a snapshot, it's a story. And that story should be honest. It should be rooted in values, in competence, in courage. It should come from deep within you, not from the latest trend or what the algorithm wants to push this week. Because trends die, real things last. So what does that mean for you? It means you need to rethink what you're chasing. You need to unplug from the noise, the constant barrage of comparisons, and ask yourself, what kind of person am I trying to become? Not how can I look successful, but how can I live a life that's actually worth something? Because one day, maybe not today, but one day you're going to have to live with the consequences of how you answered that question. The accolades will fade, the bank account will fluctuate, the camera will stop recording, and all that's left is, will you be proud of the choices you made? So no, success isn't about wealth and status. They lied to you. It's about truth. It's about purpose. It's about building something inside yourself that cannot be bought, cannot be shaken, and cannot be taken away when the applause stops. They lied to you about success when they told you it would be easy. When they told you that if you just believed in yourself, visualized the life you wanted, and stayed positive, everything would fall into place. That's not how life works, not in the real world. Success doesn't come without a cost. It doesn't land in your lap just because you manifested it or whispered affirmations into a mirror. That's a fairy tale sold to you by people who want your clicks and your compliance. It's attractive, yes, this idea that success is your birthright, that it's inevitable if you're just aligned, but it's not true. It never was. Success is earned, and it's earned the hard way, through effort, through discipline, through sacrifice, and through pain. Not because pain is noble in itself, but because the process of achieving anything meaningful will demand something from you. It will confront your laziness, your insecurity, your need for comfort, and constant validation. And if you're not willing to suffer a little in the short term, you're gonna suffer a lot in the long term. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't get to avoid pain. You only get to choose which pain you're willing to carry. The pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And regret is corrosive. It eats away at you slowly, quietly, and relentlessly. There's this myth, this toxic modern myth, that passion is enough, that if you love what you do, it'll never feel like work. That's nonsense. There's not a single person who's built something worthwhile who hasn't suffered for it. Passion fades. Motivation disappears. What's left when those things go? Discipline, structure, routine. Doing what's necessary even when it's inconvenient, even when you're tired, even when no one is watching and no one is clapping. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? We've been trained to crave instant gratification. If it's not giving you results in a week, quit. If it doesn't feel good immediately, stop. We've become so allergic to discomfort that we forget discomfort is the birthplace of growth. Success, real success, requires you to voluntarily step into discomfort, to confront chaos and not flinch, to do what others won't so you can live how others can't. There's this tendency, especially among the young, to overestimate what can be achieved in a short span of time and to dramatically underestimate what can be achieved across a long, disciplined, committed path. People want the peak, but they don't want the climb. They want the body, but not the workout. They want the business, but not the late nights, the fear, the risk, and yet they wonder why they're unfulfilled. It's because they've been conditioned to pursue results rather than meaning. and meaning only emerges through sustained effort in the face of resistance. The psychological literature is clear about this, by the way. Human beings derive their sense of identity and value not from pleasure, but from competence, specifically from the struggle to become competent at something difficult. That's how you grow. That's how you earn self-respect, not by being handed success, but by becoming the kind of person who can shoulder the burden that success demands. People think they want freedom. They don't. What they want is purpose, because unlimited freedom, freedom from responsibility, freedom from structure, freedom from accountability, leads to chaos, not happiness. You become aimless, directionless. That's when anxiety spikes. That's when nihilism creeps in. You see it everywhere. People who had every option in the world and ended up doing nothing because they were never taught how to suffer voluntarily. They were never taught that meaningful success is inseparable from hardship. And here's the thing, you can choose not to try. You can reject the struggle. You can take the easy route. You can numb the discomfort with distraction, scrolling endlessly, binging, blaming, avoiding. But deep down, you'll know that you're not living up to your potential. You'll know that you're cheating yourself. And that knowledge will manifest in anxiety, in depression, in a quiet sense of despair that something is fundamentally off, because something is off. You were made to take on responsibility. You were made to contend with the weight of life, and through that become someone formidable. You want to succeed, then take on something heavy. Pick a burden that's just beyond your current strength and carry it until it becomes light, and then pick up something heavier. That's how it works. You don't build muscle by lying on the couch. You build it by straining, failing, and recovering. And your mind is no different. Your character is no different. You grow by pushing against resistance. And if life isn't offering enough resistance on its own, then you need to impose some voluntarily. You need to train yourself, shape yourself. That's what separates the successful from the spectators. Not talent, not luck, not who their parents were. Resilience, the willingness to continue even when it's no longer fun. There will be days when you're misunderstood, when you're exhausted, and the results aren't showing yet. That's where most people stop. That's where the world expects you to stop. But that's precisely the point. You need to keep going. Because success doesn't belong to the most gifted, it belongs to the most persistent. The people who can take the hits, get back up, and move forward again. Slowly, maybe, painfully even, but forward. So if you're waiting for it to get easier, stop waiting. It doesn't get easier, you get stronger. That's the whole point. That's the entire game. And the deeper you understand that, the more dangerous you become. Not in a destructive sense, but in the sense that you cannot be easily broken, because you've forged yourself through fire. You've earned your victories, and there's a quiet, powerful confidence that comes from that. They lied to you about success when they told you it would come quickly and without cost. The truth is, the path is narrow, the path is hard, but it's also the only one worth walking. They lied to you about success when they told you it looked the same for everyone, that there's a single universal blueprint, a life formula stamped out in the same sterile mold, that if you just followed the path laid out in front of you, graduate from the right school, land the right job, marry the right person, buy the right house in the right neighborhood, then you'd be successful. That's the lie. It's efficient, yes, and tidy. It makes people easier to manage, but it strips away the uniqueness of your soul, your suffering, your story. Because true success is not external, it's personal, it's internal, it's specific to you. And if you allow yourself to be measured by someone else's standard, then you're not pursuing success, you're pursuing approval. You can spend your entire life climbing a ladder only to reach the top and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. That's a tragedy. And I mean a real tragedy. Because there's nothing more devastating than discovering you've become excellent at the wrong thing. That you've sacrificed years, maybe decades, chasing a version of success that was never meant to be yours, that you ignored the quiet voice inside of you, the one that kept whispering, there's something else, there's something more. That voice is not foolish, it's not weak, it's the beginning of wisdom. You have to understand that you were not born to replicate someone else's path. You're not a cog, you're not a statistic, you're a unique configuration of strengths, flaws, potential, and pain. And your success has to reflect that uniqueness. It has to be crafted deliberately, not copied blindly. That means taking the time to ask difficult, existential questions. What kind of life is worth living for me? What do I find meaningful? Not what am I told is meaningful, but what resonates deeply in my bones. What am I willing to struggle for, sacrifice for, even suffer for? Because those questions point you toward a path that's actually aligned with who you are, not just with what's popular or profitable or palatable to others. And here's where the danger creeps in. When you start looking sideways, when you compare yourself to your peers, to the people on your feed, to the highlight reels curated for maximum envy. Comparison is the death of personal vision. It clouds your judgment. It makes you question your pace, your choices, your values, and it pulls you away from your own lane. You can't run your race if your eyes are always on someone else's track. You can't build something authentic while trying to mimic someone else's success formula. That's not just ineffective, it's self-betrayal. There's also a spiritual weight to this, a metaphysical responsibility, because to ignore your individual path is to waste the potential embedded in you. It's to deny the gift of your own existence, and you don't get to do that without consequence. Your soul knows when you're living someone else's dream, and it will protest in the form of anxiety, depression, resentment, fatigue, not always immediately, but inevitably. You can't deceive yourself forever, not without breaking something important inside. It's tempting to adopt society's definition of success because it comes with applause. It's easy to say, I'm doing well, when your metrics match the world's expectations. But what if you don't want those things? What if your idea of success has nothing to do with making millions or being recognized or standing at the top of a corporate ladder? What if success for you is raising strong children, or creating art that speaks truth, or quietly serving others with integrity? That might not get you a trophy, it might not trend, but it might give you peace, and that peace is priceless. You know, people often ask, how do I know if I'm on the right path? The answer isn't in your resume, it's not in your follower count, it's not even in your income, it's in your conscience. When you lay your head down at night, is there alignment between what you believe and how you live? Are you pursuing a life that actually means something to you, or are you performing for an audience that doesn't even care? Because there's a massive difference between being impressive and being fulfilled, and far too many people waste their best years trying to be impressive. They contort themselves into a shape that gets applause, but they can't maintain it. It's exhausting to live inauthentically, and eventually something breaks, the body, the marriage, the mind. So you either choose alignment now, or you deal with disintegration later. This isn't about throwing out ambition, it's about refining ambition, about directing it towards something that actually matters to you, something that's yours. Because when your ambition is aligned with your values, your effort becomes sustainable. Your sacrifices start to feel worthwhile. Your life begins to feel coherent. That's when you find the kind of success that doesn't evaporate under pressure. That's when you develop an inner confidence that doesn't rely on external validation. And this is where meaning enters the equation. Meaning is not pleasure, it's not excitement. It's the sense that your life is ordered properly, that your suffering has purpose, that your efforts are integrated into something larger than yourself. And meaning can only be found when you stop outsourcing your definition of success and start listening, truly listening to what your soul is pointing toward. That requires stillness, it requires reflection, and it requires, because often what your soul wants will conflict with what the world wants from you. And you have to be strong enough to stand your ground. You have to be willing to disappoint the crowd, to stay loyal to yourself. So they lied to you when they said success has one shape, one face, one path. That's not truth. That's propaganda. Real success is deeply individual. It takes into account your temperament, your limitations, your strength, your wounds. It honors your story, and it doesn't demand that you sacrifice your identity for approval. It requires that you become more of who you are, not less. If you want to live a successful life, then stop chasing borrowed dreams. Stop seeking validation in empty places. Start building a life that feels right, not just looks right. And remember, the most successful people are not the ones who conformed most completely to the world's definition. They're the ones who dared to define success on their own terms and had the strength to follow through. They lied to you about success when they told you that once you achieved it, you'd finally be happy. That once you reached a certain level, got the job, the title, the money, the admiration, then all the emptiness inside would disappear. That's one of the most dangerous lies of all, because it suggests that happiness is some kind of reward you receive after you've proven yourself, a finish line that finally lets you rest. But life doesn't work like that. It never. The problem with chasing success for the promise of happiness is that it sets you up for a crash the moment you arrive. There are people, intelligent, driven, high-functioning people, who have climbed to the top of their respective ladders and found nothing there. No sense of completion, no lasting joy, just a gnawing realization that they've been moving so fast for so long, they never stopped to ask why, and now they're stuck, surrounded by the fruits of their labor, but starving for something real, something true. You see it in the eyes of people who made it. You see it in the celebrities, the CEOs, the so-called influencers, people with all the external markers of success, and yet plagued by anxiety, addiction, broken relationships, burnout. How do you explain that? If success equals happiness, why are the most successful among us often the most miserable? Maybe it's because they were never taught the difference between achieving and becoming, between accumulation and transfer, between climbing the ladder and building a life that actually nourishes the soul. Happiness is not the result of success. That's a false equation. Happiness is the byproduct of living rightly, of aligning your actions with your values, your efforts with your meaning, your progress with your principles. And meaning isn't always enjoyable. That's the people want happiness to feel good all the time, but real meaning comes with suffering. It comes with weight. It demands responsibility. It stretches you in uncomfortable ways, but it's worth it because meaning sustains you in a way pleasure never can. When you chase success with the promise that happiness is waiting on the other side, you put your contentment on a moving target. You keep telling yourself, just a little more, and then I'll be satisfied. More money, more recognition, but satisfaction keeps moving, just out of reach. That's the psychological treadmill of our time. You never feel like you've arrived, because arrival is a mirage, and the more you achieve without grounding, the more hollow you feel. That's why the lie is so seductive. It always promises relief later, but never delivers now. We have to confront the reality that no amount of external achievement will heal an internal emptiness. You can't fill a soul with trophies. You can't patch emotional wounds with applause. And you can't substitute love and connection with likes and followers. But that's what people are trying to do, medicate their dissatisfaction with performance, hoping that if they're successful enough, maybe they'll finally be that if they become valuable in the eyes of the world, maybe they'll feel valuable to themselves. But that kind of validation never satisfies, because it's built on a foundation of self. You need to ask yourself this question: if I strip away all the external things, career, money, reputation, what's left of me? Can I live with that person? Can I respect that person? Because that's where real success, with the internal structure of a person who has integrated meaning into their life, not a person who's perfect or always happy, but one who is whole, honest with themselves, clear on what matters, and anchored in something deeper than achievement. This is where responsibility comes into the picture again, not responsibility imposed by others, but voluntarily assumed responsibility, because that's where purpose is born. It's not in the outcome, it's in the process of carrying something meaningful. When you wake up in the morning and know that your life is aimed towards something worthwhile, even if it's difficult, even if it costs you, that's when you begin to experience a kind of joy that isn't dependent on success at all. It's deeper, it's more enduring. And if you really pay attention to the people who are truly content, not just successful, but content, you'll notice something else. They're not obsessed with themselves. They've grown out of that narcissistic shell that so much of modern ambition is trapped in. They've turned their attention outward toward service, toward contribution, toward legacy. Because when your life becomes about more than just you, your pain starts to make sense. Your struggle becomes part of something redemptive. That's where fulfillment lives, in the intersection between responsibility and meaning. But that's a hard message to sell, because it doesn't sparkle, it doesn't come with instant gratification, it doesn't give you a dopamine hit, it just tells you the truth. And the truth is, happiness is not something you get after you succeed, it's something you cultivate while becoming the kind of person who can carry success with grace. And the irony is, when you stop chasing happiness as a reward and start living with integrity and purpose instead, happiness tends to show up quietly, almost as a side effect. You weren't designed to be constantly chasing, constantly proving, constantly exhausted. You were designed to grow, to become. And real success, the kind that matters, the kind that satisfies, grows in the soil of your character, in your integrity, in your willingness to wrestle with pain instead of escape it, to sacrifice now for something better later, and to live a life that your future self would look back on with respect. So they lied to you when they said success would make you happy. The truth is, happiness is not found at the end of a finish line. It's built slowly, quietly, in the trenches of everyday choices. It's what emerges when you live in accordance with truth, when you align your life with what's meaning, when you stop performing and start living from the inside out. And in that kind of life,